Greetings YouTube, Ram55 here, and tonight I want to present a real quick video in trains on how to set up an interactive industry. It's actually pretty easy. I created this one baseboard route here, and I'll give you a real quick tour. Let me show you first the assets that I'm using. It's all pretty quick and dirty and not real complicated. So first off, I'm using some freight cars, that will be able to handle some freight that you'll be able to see. These open hoppers, they got an engine to pull them around. And then these are the tracks that are the important part. Let's figure out what these things are. The ones I'm using are actually these down here. It's called the PROTOLARS aggregate and the PROTOLARS industrial. Those are the ones that are the most useful. You can also find on the website these other ones, or on the download station. This one's called the multiple industry new. You can use this one over here. It's called multiple industry new. There we go. Multiple industry and multiple industry liquid. So the way these work is you put them in the route, you just attach your track to them, and then when you click on this question mark and then click on the asset, you get this menu right here, which lets you say what kind of stuff you want to load, and then it gives you a fairly large list of things that you can actually load while you're doing there, so you can determine what you want to load when your trains pull up to that spot. Same thing with this one over here. When you click on that, you get that same menu. But the ones that I like, and I'll tell you why in a little bit, why I like these better, are these right here. You can go click on these. It gives you a slightly different menu. And this one here, you can see you can load 20-foot containers, 40-foot containers, all kinds of stuff. So whatever you want to incorporate into your layout, if you can find it on this list, you just kind of add that when your trains pull up and deposit some cars over this track. And then the one that I'm using today is this one right here. And that is for aggregates. And it allows you to load up, limestone, bauxite, aluminum, coal, coke, all that kind of stuff. So how do you do that? And I'm going to go through several different variations of how you can actually do this in your layout. You can see I've incorporated that piece of track right here in this section over here by the mine. You just attach your track to it, and it takes on the characteristic of whatever track type you're using. And then you click on it, and the way I've set mine up is to load coal. This is going to be where the cars get loaded. And these are ordinarily, as you can see up here, already set to produce or consume, so they can go either way. You can either load up your cars or take the products out of the cars, the rate at which it's produced or consumed, and the initial amount that's there when you start up the session. And then you can say this is how much you want to load or unload when the train pulls in. So let me show you how I got this set up for coal. So I didn't touch these numbers here. I changed the rate to maximum, and basically what I do is I just click on that, and I will then type in 9s all the way across, hit the check mark, and then that makes that the maximum amount that you can consume, or in this case produce. And the initial amount that starts out when I start the session is also done the same way. You just, I do the maximum amount, type in 9s all the way across, hit the check mark, and it comes up like that. And then down here, how much do I want to load? Well, I also want to load the maximum amount, so I just put 9s all the way across there, accept that. And we're not going to unload here. We're strictly going to load. So once you've done that, you are basically set up to go. And over here we have the power company. So this is the area that's going to actually be consuming the coal that they're mining over there at that mountain. And again, I've done the same thing with these scenery objects here, only in this situation, rather than produce, we're actually consuming now. So when I go down to coal, you can see I've set it up the same thing, but rather than use the produce column in this window, I'm using the consume. I've actually maximized them here as well. Initial is 0, so that they will unload all my cars completely when they pull in, and unload the maximum amount as well. Accept that, and you do that for every one that you have here. At the very top of this window, process time for production consumption, 1 minute. Start delay, 2 minutes. I imagine that once you start your session, this is how long it takes before this industry starts to gear up for the shift work for that day or whatever. You can set that for whatever you want. Start delay in minutes. Let's change that to 3. So it will wait 3 minutes after I deliver the cars, and then you can have it load 1 car at a time or unload all the cars at one time, and the interval of unloading between each car. So for grins, let's just do load 1 car at a time. It's going to take 10 seconds before it starts on the next car. And that's only if you're really watching it happen. If you're dropping cars off and then you go off to some other part of the route and you really don't care, you're not watching it, it's not really that big a deal, you can unload the whole train all at once. It really doesn't matter. However, I think for most of us, we're going to be off on different parts of the route. After we drop the cars off, we really don't care. I would put in some kind of a delay, say 5-10 minutes. You drive away from the area, and you don't really care how quickly the cars get unloaded and whether they do them all at once or one at a time. So it's your choice, but that's a really cool setting. So let's get rolling. Again, you can set these up anywhere on the route, and one of the difference between these short pieces of track right here and the longer pieces of track like these that I really like is to operate these longer pieces and the ones with the wall, you actually have to physically drive your cars over this section of track, and they only unload when they're directly over that portion of track. With these shorter pieces, if any part of your string of cars is over that section of track, they will activate that activity, and they will go one at a time, and I'll show you how that works over here. And that's kind of neat, so you don't have to actually physically back up and load or unload your trains. Let's get slowed down here. Let's make sure these switches are all set up correctly, and it looks like they are. So we're just going to pull in. The other thing that I like to do is when I've got the track laid, it's invisible where that little activation part is. So I like to put a figure or a building or a tree, something that tells me where that piece of track that I have to drive into is. And it helps me remember where it is and make sure that I've got the cars spotted correctly. So what I'm going to do is, now that I'm in this section of track, I'm going to stop my train. And in 2 minutes, we'll see, starting at the front and working our way to the back. Boy, that mouse is so sensitive. Working our way to the back, you'll see these cars start to load up. So I'm hearing some activity. There it goes. It's starting to fill up, and it'll be 10 seconds between each of these cars. So you don't have to be attached to the train to make this work. Now it's important, and you'll see what's going on here, when you design your track for this very reason. Unless you want to push the cars backwards, you need to have some kind of a runaround track. And because there's some empties already spotted here, I can't use that track for a runaround. So I'm going to actually go use the tipple tracks to do that job right now. Now right now I'm going to show you another thing that you could do, prototypical, maybe a little bit more fun, a little bit more switching involved. It's up to you. You can play this game however you want. I'm going to go grab these cars right here, and rather than spot the empties on these receiving tracks, you can actually do the same thing, bring your cars in, run around, and then go back and grab onto them and then spot them underneath the tipple, and you can have them filled over at the tipple rather than over here on these receiving tracks. If you're just going to drop the cars off and leave and pretend that this industrial switcher here is doing all the work, it really doesn't matter. But if you want, you can do it this way as well. We'll come grab these cars. You can see all these are loaded now. So when you come back later in the day, cars are done, these guys have done their job, and you can pretend that this guy here has done all the switching for you when you do it that way. Come in a little bit fast there. So if this was a stub track, you just back them in like I am now. Otherwise you could pull in forward and it'll save you a move. And we'll go ahead and unhook these cars here. Now they'll sit over that hidden track right here. 2-minute delay and they'll start to fill up just like they did over here. I used to work at Great Lakes Steel in Detroit when I was just out of high school. Loved the job, fascinating job. One of the jobs I had was working at the coke ovens at the steel mill. And I was a high line operator. The high line took the coke after it was produced in the coke ovens from the wharf where it was cooled down after it was baked, and it was transferred on conveyor belts just like this here through a series of belts and buildings. And it was sent from us up to the blast furnace where they were making the pig iron for the production of steel. And when they didn't need the coke that was being produced, we were storing them in hoppers just like this. So I was actually in a building just like this. We had 2 tracks. The Great Lakes Steel switchers would spot the cars. We would actually have a big electric motor, 2 of them, one for each track, with a strong steel cable. We would be up here in the station, and we would actually put the cable on those cars and we would pull them back with that electric motor. So we didn't need an engine to spot them as we were filling them up. We actually used the motor to move the cars. The other option would be to have a yard crew in an engine spotting all the cars underneath that station, but that would be very time consuming and a waste of their time. By having that electric motor and pulling the cars through, it's a lot more efficient use of that engine and people's time. So that's how we did things over at the coke oven at the steel mill. So option number one, drop the empties off on this track, have them loaded up. You don't really care that it's done prototypically underneath the tipples. You drop the empties off, you assume that the industry switcher has actually taken the empties, put them over here, got them loaded, and then spotted them back over here when they're full. Option number two, you bring the empties in, you spot them yourself underneath the tipples and have them loaded up over there. A little bit more prototypical, a little bit more switching for you to do, maybe a little bit more fun. It depends on what you want to do with the hobby and how it works into your operating scheme. So now, you've been out doing your job, it's later in the day, and it's now your time to come and switch the mine here. The empties that you brought in earlier or yesterday, however it works in your scheme, are now full. So now we need to go grab those and bring them over to the power station, one of the consumers for the coal that they're producing here at the mine. So let's take it over to the power station, and this could go off route through a portal. There's a lot of different things you can do with this scenario. So they fill up here on this layout industry. You can take them to another on layout industry where they consume that product, which is kind of cool. And the other option is you could just take these to your yard and have a train that's going to take them off the layout via a portal to basically anywhere you want in the world. Use your imagination. So lots of different ways to incorporate this system into your train layout. So let's just follow this train as we take it over to the power company. The other thing you'll note that these cars empty have a whole different dynamic than they do when they're full. This train needs a lot more power to accelerate, a lot more time to accelerate, because these cars are now heavy, and that dynamic is actually modeled in the game, which I think is pretty outstanding. Same kind of thing. You can have a stub track over here for an industrial switcher that is operated by the power company. You can simulate that they do all the switching of bringing the cars up here where they're unloaded. Or you could simulate all that stuff. Depends on what you want to do with your route. What I'm going to do here is just bring them in, spot them over this area. I'm going to run around just like I did before. We've got it set up here. They're going to unload here. You can go off, do your business. You come back like we are now to pick up the string of now empty hoppers. And then take them back to the mine. And that can be a cycle that's repeated over and over and over and over again. You can see that they're emptying down here. No, I'm not going to latch on because I don't know if that will reset the timer. So I'm just going to wait patiently while these all unload. I'll be back with you in a minute. Okay, so there's our last car unloaded. And now here we are coming back, end of the shift, end of the day, next day, couple days later, whatever it is in your scenario. The cars that we brought in full are now empty. And we're going to grab them and take them back to the yard. Or, as I'm going to do now, we'll just take them right back to the coal mine just to show you how this cycle will keep happening over and over and over again. So this is how you would set up a situation for two industries that are on your layout. Now, it's also important, as it was over at the mine, make sure you leave yourself an out. You want to have some place to run around this train. If you bring these trains in this way and your engine's down on the far end, and let's say that there were some full or empty cars right here that you want to take out, you have to either push them back with the cars in front of the train back to the yard, or leave yourself an out and have a way to run around to get to the other end of the train. So make sure that you design that portion of your route correctly, just so it's easier for you to operate. Yeah, you can push cars backwards, and I've seen trains, real trains, doing that, but it doesn't look cool. So once again, we're back at the mine, bringing these cars directly from the power company or from the yard, however that works, the way you've got your scenario set up. Once again, we're going to spot them over this section of track so that they're fill up. We're going to run around. And then we're going to go grab these full hoppers and take them back either to the yard or to the mine or to the power company. So these cars are already loaded up, and we're not even done switching the tipple tracks. Again, just adjust the delay time so those cars would still be empty. Okay, so let's go back up to the front of the train and take these back over to the power station. Almost got it full throttle, and this engine can just barely get this big old heavy train going, and this isn't even that long of a train, so consider that when you're modeling how many engines you want to put on, so you have enough traction power to pull the train that you're simulating. Trains were just not my thing when I was younger, and it wasn't until I was 13 that I got interested. I always had this dream, like a lot of us do, of building this basement-filling layout of N-scale, epic proportion stuff. That never happened. Number one, it's freaking expensive. A lot of maintenance, a lot of skill, a lot of time involved in getting all that stuff set up. So here we are back at the mine. Again, you can deposit the cars up at the top, have your unloading track right here, as opposed to down here in the receiving tracks. And this can go on and on and on. You can spend your whole day switching back and forth between the mine and the power company, or you can just have this incorporated into your layout, and you're off doing other things. So however you want to have that set up, whatever works for you. I wanted to give you an update on some modifications I made to the scenario and the track plan that I had yesterday. I spent a good deal of time working it out to see how it would operate under different functions, and one of them was to have you pull your engines in, a road switcher pull in, and use these PROTOLARS industrial tracks that are invisible when you're actually playing the game. They're obviously visible here in Surveyor. But you pull in here and you have the cars loaded and unloaded, depending on whether you're at the mine or at the power company, and have that done here. And I think that's probably the most direct way, and that's the way I would set it up if I was going to put this into my layout. You can also see that I've added some hopper cars with a switching engine over here, and that's basically just scenery. Those are not functional. I would not plan on them being functional, but it shows that this switcher is spotting the cars and maybe actually moving them as these are being loaded from this building here. But again, this is just scenery. It's not actually functional. The functional part for you, the modeler, is these two tracks here. The other thing I've done is I put in a third track, this one right here, which is a runaround, because you can see that these cars, when you arrive, are loaded. They're ready for you to be picked up and taken to the power company. But you're going to be bringing a string of empties and occupying that middle track right here, which means when you do that, you don't have any way to get back on the other side of these cars to pull them either to the power company or back to the yard. You need a runaround track, or you're going to end up attaching to the far end of the train and pushing them, which to me looks kind of funny. Yeah, I guess real trains do that, but it looks kind of funny. So I put in a runaround track so you can get to this end of the track when both of these tracks are occupied. I also spent a great deal of the time yesterday working out AI control, having that engine that sits over here on this pocket track actually picking up the empties that you brought in and spotting them underneath the tipples to get loaded. And after some trial and error, I actually got it to do that. Unfortunately, one of the limitations of the game is when AI spots empties underneath these tipples and over these PROTOLARS pieces of track, they don't load. And I'm not sure why. They only load when you, a real player, spots the cars. So I'm not sure why there's that limitation. The other thing to remember is this is not track, actually. It's part of the scenery, so you're going to find it underneath this Objects tab, not under the Track tab. Now over here at the mine, the same thing applies. You're going to have two tracks, one where you're going to bring in loaded, and one where you're going to take the empties out. And if both of those are occupied, because you're going to be having some empties already spotted on one of these tracks, you're going to bring the empties, and that's going to occupy this track. You're going to need a runaround track. So I redesigned this yard a little bit. So one of these will have a string of empties ready for you to pick up and take back to the mine for loading. The other one, you're going to bring in the loaded cars from the mine and occupy this track. So I developed a third track as a runaround track to get to the other end. And again, as a piece of scenery, I put a switcher with a cut of cars, some of which have already gone over the unloading area, so they're empty. And again, that's pure scenery. It's not actually going to be functional. It's just to make it look cool. I also determined that, you couldn't put a whole cut of 12 cars up there. Number one, this section of runoff track at the other end is not long enough. Number two, that's awful heavy to go up this inclined hill right here. So they're going to take smaller cuts of cars, maybe 4 to 6 at a time. So that's what I modeled here. So I just wanted to show you the updates that I incorporated. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please leave some comments. If something that you see that I could do better or differently, please leave comments, and enjoy getting feedback from you guys about what I can do better to make my videos more interesting. So hope you have a great day. See you later.